The huge space station called Harmony Edge shook like a leaf in a storm. The red lights flashed everywhere, making the metal walls look like they were covered in blood. Admiral Taeho Kim stood in the middle of the bridge watching his officers work. At their stations, some had tentacles, some had claws, and some had arms that looked like machines, but they all moved fast, trying to save. Their Leveso Jin Park was the communications officer, and she was young but brave. She had been working for 2 days without sleep. Her voice was calm. Even though death was all around them, the shield generators are at 12%, she said. The outer ring defenses are failing. The enemy is too strong. The Void Swarm was not like any enemy the galaxy had ever seen before. They were not alive, but they were not machines either. They were something else, something that ate everything in their path. They consumed planets and stars and entire solar systems, leaving nothing behind but empty black space. No one knew where they came from or what they wanted. They just ate and ate and ate, like hungry monsters that could never be full. Captain Hyun-Woo Lee worked at the tactical station. His scaled hands moved over the holographic displays showing the battle outside. Thousands of ships from different species fought against the endless black vessels that seemed to swallow light itself. The Zeltharians flew in their crystal ships that sparkled like diamonds. The Krix used their swarm fighters that moved like angry insects. The Nephilim floated in their cloud ships that looked like pieces of sky, but they were all dying. The enemy ships were huge. Each one was as big as a small moon, and they were covered in weapons that could crack planets in half. They moved in perfect formation, like they were all controlled by one mind. Their hulls were black as night, and they seemed to absorb all the light around them, making space itself look darker. Sir, we are getting a message from the Starlight. Prophet Sojin announced. Her voice cracked a little. Captain, Veltar says his ship is badly damaged. He wants permission to ram the lead enemy ship. Taeho closed his eyes for a moment. The Starlight Prophet was one of their best ships with over 3,000 people on board. But if they were talking about ramming attacks, then things were very bad. Tell him to hold position, he said. We are not giving up yet, but the truth was they were giving up. The Void Swarm had already eaten 40% of the galaxy. Earth had fallen 3 months ago, along with all the human colonies. The proud Altarian Empire had lasted only 2 weeks. The ancient Keeper worlds with their super-strong defenses had been swept away like sandcastles in the wind. Young Ensign Minho Choi was barely out of school, but he was brave. He looked up from his sensor station with wide eyes. Admiral, I'm detecting something strange. There is a massive energy signature coming from the outer rim. It is huge Servoid Swarm reinforcements. Taeho asked, even though he knew the answer would doom them all. No, sir, the energy patterns are completely different. And they are not coming from Void Swarm territory. They are coming from dead space, from the regions the swarm already consumed. The bridge became very quiet. Everyone knew what dead space looked like. It was empty void where stars used to shine, where entire civilizations had once lived. Nothing could survive in those regions. Nothing could even exist there. The Void Swarm left nothing behind when they fed. Captain Hyun-Woo clicked his claws nervously against his console. Sir, whatever it is moving very fast. Faster than anything we have ever seen, and the mass readings are off the chart. Sojin suddenly sat up straight. At her station, her face was pale. Admiral, I'm picking up communication signals. They are coming from the unknown contacts. Put it through. Taeho ordered. His heart was beating fast. Maybe it was some unknown council fleet that had survived. Maybe there was still hope. The bridge speakers made crackling sounds. Then a voice spoke in perfect Galactic standard, but with an accent that made several officers gasp. This is Admiral Jae-Sung-yoon of the Human Deathworlder Defense Force. We received your distress signal. All council vessels pull back to minimum safe distance. We are going to show these Void Swarm bastards what happens when you mess with our galaxy. Bridge erupted in shocked whispers. Humans, but Earth had fallen. The entire human sector had been consumed. How could there be human ships out there, sir? Minho called out. His voice was shaking with excitement. You need to see this. I am reading thousands of ships. Tens of thousands. They are everywhere, sir. It is like they came out of nowhere. Ha stared at the tactical display as it updated. Ship after ship appeared on the sensors. Each one was broadcasting human identification codes. But these were not the sleek, elegant vessels of the old Earth Navy. These ships looked like they had been forged in the fires of hell itself. They were scarred and angular, and covered with weapons that hurt to look at. The human ships did not look like anything in the Council databases. They were dark and twisted like they had been through countless battles. Their hulls were covered in scars and burns, but somehow they looked stronger because of it. Some of them seemed to be made from the wreckage of other ships, welded together in patterns that defied understanding. Council Station. Harmony Edge, the human voice continued. This is the vengeance of Earth. We have been waiting for this moment. Today the galaxy learns why they called us Deathworlders. Tactical display showed something impossible where moments before there had been empty space consumed by the swarm now blazed with the engine signatures of what appeared to be the largest fleet in galactic history. Over 50,000 ships appeared on the sensors. Each one was bigger and more heavily armed than anything the Council had ever built. Sir, how is this possible? Hyun-woo asked. The consumed regions are dead space. Nothing can survive there. Nothing can even move through hyperspace in those areas. The human fleet began moving into formation, and their coordination was perfect. Every ship moved exactly where it needed to be, like they were all controlled by one mind. But more disturbing were the ships themselves. Some looked like they had been built from the wreckage of void swarm vessels. Their hulls used the same light-absorbing materials that made the enemy so terrifying. Admiral Yoon Tae-ho said into the com, I remember you from the Proxima Conference. You were Earth's greatest naval commander. We thought you died when Seoul fell. Admiral Kim Yoon replied. His voice carried the weight of terrible loss. I remember you too. You questioned whether humans belonged in the Galactic Council's military structure. You said we were too aggressive, too willing to take casualties. The human ships continued to arrive. More and more of them, until the tactical display could barely show them all. Some were as large as space stations. Others were sleek and fast like hunting predators. All of them carried weapons that the Council sensors could not identify. We saw what the swarm did to the Altarians. Yoon continued. We saw what happened to the Keeper worlds. So we did what humans do best. We adapted. We learned. We became something new. The space around the human fleet began to shimmer and bend like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The very fabric of space-time seemed to be affected by their presence. The Council ships' sensors were going crazy, trying to understand what they were seeing. Admiral, what are those readings? Tae-ho asked, pointing to energy signatures. Unlike anything in their databases. Unknown, Sir. Captain Lee replied, but the power output is staggering. Each of their smaller vessels is putting out more energy than our largest dreadnoughts. The human fleet moved with purpose and precision. Every ship knew exactly where it was going and what it was supposed to do. Their formation was not just military, it was artistic, like a deadly dance performed in the void of space. Admiral Yoon appeared on the main screen, but he did not look like the polished officer. Tae-ho remembered his uniform was black as space itself, and his eyes held a cold fury that made even the veteran admiral step back. The man who had once been humanity's finest military representative now looked like something forged in a furnace. Admiral Kim Yoon said, you questioned whether humans belonged in your military command structure. You said we were too aggressive, too willing to take casualties. Today you will learn what human aggression really means when we have nothing left to lose. The tactical display on Harmony Edge showed something that made no sense at all. Captain Hyun-woo Lee's hands shook as he tried to understand what his sensors were telling him. Admiral, I am reading over 50,000 vessels, dreadnoughts, carriers. Ships I do not even have names for. Admiral Tae-ho. Kim gripped the metal railing so hard his knuckles turned white. Through the big window he could see distant flashes of human ships appearing out of what looked like twisted hyperspace, but that was impossible. Hyperspace did not work in consumed zones. The void swarm feeding left behind dead space where faster than light travel could not happen. Sir, incoming transmission from the lead vessel. Sojin Park announced. Her voice was full of wonder. It is Admiral Jae-sung-yoon. He is the Tae-ho knew that name. Every military officer in the galaxy knew it. Jae-sung-yoon had been Earth's greatest naval commander, the hero of the Battle of Alpha Centauri. He was supposed to have died with his planet. When the swarm consumed the Sol system, the main screen flickered and showed the inside of a human warship bridge. But this was not like any human vessel Tae-ho had ever seen. The walls were dark metal, scarred and pitted like they had been through countless battles. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across the faces of the crew and the air itself seemed to shimmer with barely controlled energy. Admiral Yun stood at the center of it all, and Taeho barely recognized him, the man who had once been the polished representative of humanity's finest military traditions, now looked like something forged in a furnace. His uniform was black as space itself, and his eyes held a cold fury that made even the veteran admiral step back. Admiral Kim Yoon said, his voice carried the weight of worlds. I remember you from the Proxima conference. You questioned whether humans belonged in the Galactic Council military command structure. You said we were too aggressive, too willing to take casualties. Taeho felt his mouth go dry. Admiral Yoon, we thought you were dead. Earth fell 3 months ago. The entire Sol system was evacuated. Yoon interrupted. Every human world, every colony, every deep space station. We saw what the swarm did to the Altarians. We saw what happened to the Keeper worlds, so we did what humans do best. We adapted. On the tactical display, the human fleet was moving into formation with military precision that took Taeho's breath away. Each ship moved with perfect coordination, like they were parts of a single mind, but more disturbing were the ships themselves. Some looked like they had been built from the wreckage of Void Swarm vessels. Their hulls used the same light-absorbing materials that made the enemy so terrifying. Captain Lee, what are those readings? Taeho asked, pointing to energy signatures unlike anything in their databases. Unknown, sir, but the power output is staggering. Each of their smaller vessels is putting out more energy than our largest dreadnought. Sensign Min-ho Choi looked up from his station. His young face was pale with shock. Admiral, I am detecting something else. The space around their fleet is different. It is like they are carrying their own pocket of normal space-time with them. Lieutenant Commander Sojin Park's voice cut through the bridge chatter. Sir, we are receiving targeting data from the human fleet. They are painting every single Void Swarm ship in the system, all 60,000 of them. Taeho stared at the display. The Void Swarm had been systematically destroying their forces for hours. Their dark vessels seemed immune to conventional weapons. The Council's most advanced military technology had barely scratched their hulls. Admiral Yoon, Taeho said into the com channel, our weapons are ineffective against their armor. We have tried everything: quantum torpedoes, plasma cannons, even antimatter charges. Nothing works. Yoon scarred face showed something that might have been a smile, but it held no warmth. That is because you have been fighting them the wrong way. You have been trying to be civilized, but the swarm does not understand civilization. They only understand one thing. What is that? Death. The human fleet suddenly accelerated, moving faster than physics should have allowed. Their ships began to glow with an inner light that hurt to look at directly, but more disturbing was the sound. Somehow, impossibly, the vacuum of space carried the sound of their engines, a deep harmonic that vibrated through the hulls of every council vessel. All council forces. Yoon's voice boomed across all frequencies. Retreat to minimum safe distance. We are about to demonstrate why the galaxy calls us Deathworlder. Skepton Hyun Woo claws scraped against his console as he tried to understand what he was seeing. Sir, their ships are charging weapons. I do not recognize the energy signatures. Are like nothing in our databases. Because they are not in your databases, came a new voice over the com. This one was younger, female, carrying a cold precision that made everyone on the bridge shiver. This is Admiral Yoonji Han of the Wrathful Phoenix. We have had 3 months to study Void Swarm technology, 3 months to understand how they consume matter and energy, and 3 months to build weapons specifically designed to kill them. The human ships look different now. Their hulls were covered in patterns that seemed to move and shift like living things. Some of the vessels had grown larger during the conversation, as if they were feeding on something in space itself. The weapons that emerged from their hulls did not look like any technology the Council had ever seen. They looked organic, alive, hungry. Sir, Minho called out. His voice was shaking. I am reading some kind of network connection between all the human ships. It is like they are all controlled by a single mind, but it was more than that. The human ships were not just connected. They were synchronized. Every movement, every decision, every breath seemed to happen at exactly the same time across the entire fleet. It was like watching a single massive organism with 50,000 parts. Admiral Dong Hyan Park's voice joined the communication. His tone carried the authority of someone who had seen too much war. This is Admiral Dong Hyan Park of the Eternal Vengeance Council. Forces, maintain your distance. We are about to deploy Scorched Earth Protocol. Scorched Earth Teho asked, though he feared he already knew the answer every human evacuation ship was equipped with. Manufacturing facilities Admiral Yoon explained, his voice carried the weight of terrible decisions. We have spent 3 months building weapons, ships, and soldiers. But more importantly, we have been studying the enemy, learning their weaknesses, understanding their fear. The Void Swarm does not feel fear, Teho protested. Everything feels fear when faced with extinction, came the cold reply. The human fleet suddenly split into 3 massive formations, each one moving to surround different sections of the Void Swarm. But as they moved, Teho began to notice something that made his blood run cold. The human ships were not just using advanced weapons, they were using Void Swarm technology itself. Captain Lee analyze those energy signatures again, Teho ordered. Focus on the human ship's hull. Shinwoo claws clicked rapidly over his console. Sir, you are not going to believe this. The human ships are using Void Swarm armor plating, but they have somehow modified it. Instead of absorbing light and energy, it is reflecting it back at amplified levels. The largest human vessel, a dreadnought that made even the Council's most massive ships look small, moved into position at the center of the Void Swarm formation. Its hull was scarred and pitted, but those scars formed patterns that looked disturbingly like ritual markings. This is the humanity wrath, Admiral Yoon announced. All ships prepare for final protocol for Earth, for Sol, for every world. These monsters consumed the massive dreadnought, began to glow with an inner light that seemed to pulse with a heartbeat. Other human ships took up positions around it, their own hulls beginning to vibrate with the same terrible energy. Sir, Sojin called out, panic creeping into her voice. I am detecting massive energy buildup in the human fleet. It is like they are preparing to sacrifice their own ships. Negative. Admiral Yoon's voice cut through the static. We are preparing to do what we should have done from the beginning. We are preparing to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity. Home. The first human weapons fired and the universe screamed. The weapons fire that came from the human fleet was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Instead of the clean energy beams and explosive missiles that Council forces used, the human ships unleashed something that seemed to tear reality itself apart. Admiral Teho Kim watched in horrified fascination as streams of what looked like liquid darkness shot out from the human vessels. When these beams hit the Void Swarm ships, something impossible happened. The enemy vessels began to dissolve, their light-absorbing hulls breaking apart at the molecular level. What in the name of the ancients are they using? Captain Hyun-Woo Lee whispered. His reptilian features were pale with shock. The answer came from Admiral Yoon Ji-han, her voice carried across the channels. With deadly calm entropy weapons, the Void Swarm consumes matter and energy by speeding up entropy, breaking down the basic forces that hold atoms together. We simply reverse the process on the tactical display. The human fleet moved through the Void Swarm formations like a force of nature. Ships that had seemed unbeatable moments before were being torn apart by weapons that attacked the very fabric of space-time. But what disturbed Teho most was not the destruction, it was the precision. Every human weapon found its mark. Every shot was calculated to cause maximum damage to the enemy while avoiding any harm to Council forces. Sir Ensign Minho Choi called out. His voice was filled with awe. I am reading some kind of network connection between all the human ships. It is like they are all controlled by a single mind. Lieutenant Commander Sojin Park looked up from her communications console. Her face was troubled. Admiral, I am intercepting human internal communications. They are speaking in code, but the encryption is unlike anything I have seen. It is constantly changing, evolving. A new voice joined the channel. This one was older, carrying the authority of someone who had seen too much war. This is Admiral Dong-Hyun Park of the Eternal Vengeance Council forces. Maintain your distance. We are about to deploy Scorched Earth Protocol. Scorched Earth. Teho asked, though he feared he already knew the answer every human evacuation ship was equipped with manufacturing facilities. Admiral Yoon explained, his voice carried the weight of terrible decisions. We have spent 3 months building weapons, ships, and soldiers. But more importantly, we have been studying the enemy, learning their weaknesses, understanding their fear. The Void Swarm does not feel fear, Teho protested. Everything feels fear when faced with extinction, came the cold reply. The human fleet suddenly split into 3 massive formations, each one moving to surround different sections of the Void Swarm, but as they moved, Teho began to notice something that made his blood run cold. The human ships were not just using advanced weapons, they were using Void Swarm technology itself, Captain Lee. Analyze those energy signatures again. Teho ordered focus on the human ship's hull. Shinwu. Claws clicked rapidly over his console. Sir, you are not going to believe this. The human ships are using Void Swarm armor plating, but they have somehow modified it instead of absorbing light and energy, it is reflecting it back at amplified levels. The largest human vessel, a dreadnought that made even the Council most massive ships look tiny, moved into position at the center of the Void Swarm formation. Its hull was scarred and pitted, but those scars formed patterns that looked disturbingly like ritual markings. This is the humanity, Wrath Admiral Yoon announced. All ships prepare for a final protocol for Earth, for Sol, for every world these monsters consumed. The massive dreadnought began to glow with an inner light that seemed to pulse with a heartbeat. Other human ships took up positions around it, their own hulls beginning to resonate with the same terrible energy. Sir Sojin called out, panic creeping into her voice. I am detecting massive energy buildup in the human fleet. It is like they are preparing to sacrifice their own ships. Negative. Admiral Yoon voice cut through the static. We are preparing to do what we should have done from the beginning. We are preparing to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity. Home. The human weapons fired again, but this time it was different. Instead of individual beams, the entire fleet seemed to fire as one, creating a web of destruction that wrapped around the Void Swarm ships. But more than that, the weapons began to sing. It was impossible. Sound could not travel through the vacuum of space, but somehow the human weapons created a harmonic resonance that could be felt in the bones of every living being in the system. It was a song of rage, of loss of a species that had been pushed too far. Admiral Minho whispered. His young face was filled with terror and awe. The Void Swarm ships, they are screaming, and they were the enemy vessels, which had never shown any sign of pain or fear, were sending out distress signals on every frequency. Their perfect formations began to break apart as individual ships tried to flee from the human weapons. Impossible. Teho breathed. They are a hive mind. They do not break formation. They do not retreat. They do now. Admiral Yunji Han voice carried a satisfaction that was almost frightening. We found their weakness. They consume fear and pain to fuel their expansion, but when faced with a species that transforms fear into rage, that converts pain into strength, they break. The human fleet pressed their advantage, moving through the void swarm like wolves among sheep. But it was not just the weapons that were devastating, it was the coordination. Every human ship moved with perfect precision, as if they were extensions of a single terrible intelligence. The Void Swarm ships that had been so terrifying moments before now looked like prey being hunted by predators, their dark hulls that absorbed all light seemed to dim as the human weapons tore through them. Some of the enemy vessels tried to form defensive clusters, but the human ships simply phased through their formations, appearing on the other side like ghosts. Sir Hyong Woo called out, his voice filled with scientific fascination and growing horror. I am analyzing the human ship hulls. They are not just armored, they are alive. The metal is regenerating, adapting to enemy weapons in real time. That is impossible. Teho protested. No. Known technology, Cano known. Council technology, interrupted Admiral Dong Hyan. Park voice over the com, but we have had 3 months to study Void Swarm adaptive capabilities. 3 months to understand how they consume and rebuild matter. We simply turned their own evolution against them. The human fleet was expanding, and that is when Teho realized something that made his blood freeze. The human ships were not just fighting the Void Swarm, they were harvesting them. Every destroyed enemy vessel was being processed by specialized human craft that seemed to appear from nowhere. Lieutenant Commander Park. Teho called to Sojin, what are those smaller human vessels doing? Sojin face was pale as she studied her readings. Sir, they are converting destroyed Void Swarm ships into new human vessels in real time. I'm watching them build an entire cruiser from the wreckage of 3 enemy fighters. The human weapons continued to sing their terrible song of vengeance, and with each note more Void Swarm ships fell. The enemy formations that had seemed so organized and deadly were now scattered and panicked, their perfect coordination shattered by weapons that attacked not Just their hulls, but their very ability to think as one. This is only the beginning, Admiral Yoon announced to the galaxy. The Void Swarm thought they could consume humanity without consequence. They were wrong. Today, we reclaim our galaxy. The Void Swarm ships began to flee in all directions, but the human fleet did not let them escape. Pursuit vessels, sleek and deadly, hunted down every fleeing enemy with relentless efficiency. It was like watching predators that had been starved for months, finally allowed to feed, and through it all the human ships continued to grow and change and evolve. Each battle made them stronger. Each victory taught them something new. They were not just winning. They were becoming something that the galaxy had never seen before, something that knew how to turn loss into strength and pain into power, something that would never give up and never surrender, something that had learned what it meant to be human. The battle that followed broke every rule of space warfare that the Galactic Council had developed over thousands of years, where normal military thinking emphasized careful positioning, measured responses, and saving resources. The human fleet fought with a terrifying combination of calculated precision and barely controlled fury. Admiral Tae-ho Kim watched from the Bridge of Harmony Edge as human ships dove directly into void swarm formations that should have torn them apart, but instead of being destroyed, they came out the other side trailing debris from enemy vessels, their hulls somehow stronger than when they had entered. Sir, I am analyzing the human ship hulls, Captain Hyun-woo Lee reported. His voice was filled with scientific fascination and growing horror. They are not just armored, they are alive. The metal is regenerating, adapting to enemy weapons in real time. That is impossible, Tae-ho protested. No known technology, Kano known council technology, interrupted Admiral Dong-hyun Park, voice over the com. But we have had 3 months to study void swarm adaptive capabilities. 3 months to understand how they consume and rebuild matter. We simply turned their own evolution against them. The human fleet was expanding. And that is when Tae-ho realized something that made his blood freeze. The human ships were not just fighting the void swarm. They were harvesting them. Every destroyed enemy vessel was being processed by specialized human craft that seemed to appear from nowhere. Lieutenant Commander Park Tae-ho called to Sojin. What are those smaller human vessels doing? Sojin face was pale as she studied her readings. Sir, they are converting destroyed void swarm ships into new human vessels in real time. I am watching them build an entire cruiser from the wreckage of 3 enemy fighters. Ensign Min-ho Choi looked up from his sensor station. His young face was filled with awe and terror. Admiral, the human fleet is growing. They started with 50,000 ships, but now I am reading over 70,000, and the number keeps climbing. Admiral Yoon's scarred face appeared on the main screen, but now Tae-ho could see other figures moving behind him. They looked human, but something was wrong. Their movements were too precise, too coordinated. Their eyes held a cold light that seemed to reflect the energy of their weapons. You are wondering about my crew, Yoon said, as if reading Tae-ho thoughts. They are volunteers, every human who died when the swarm consumed our worlds. We brought them back, not as they were, but as they needed to. But that is impossible, Tae-ho whispered. The dead cannot be. Dead can be many things. Admiral Young-ji-han voice cut through the com, carrying a cold finality. They can be memory. They can be inspiration. They can be weapons. The human fleet suddenly shifted tactics, and Tae-ho realized they had been holding back. Ships that had seemed damaged began to reveal hidden weapons vessels that appeared to be simple cruisers unfolded into massive battle platforms. The entire human formation transformed into something that looked less like a military fleet and more like a living organism. Sir, Hyun-woo called out, his reptilian features twisted with confusion. I am reading human biosignatures inside the void swarm ships. How is that possible? The answer came from a new voice. This one was younger, female, carrying an authority that made everyone on the bridge stand straighter. This is Admiral Mi Young Kim of the Retribution. We have been infiltrating void swarm vessels for weeks, learning their weaknesses, understanding their command structure. Today we activate our sleeper agents. Suddenly void swarm ships throughout the formation began to turn on each other. Their weapons, which had been devastating against Council forces, now fired on their own kind with lethal precision. Impossible, Tae-ho breathed. The void swarm does not have individuals. They are a collective consciousness. They were, Admiral Yoon corrected, but consciousness can be infected, and humans are very good at infections. The tide of battle shifted completely. What had begun as a desperate last stand by the Galactic Council became a systematic dismantling of the Void Swarm forces. But it was not just the tactics that disturbed Teho, it was the efficiency. The humans fought with a coordination that seemed to go beyond individual consciousness. Admiral Sojin called out, her voice was shaking. I am detecting something else. The human fleet they are connected. Not just through communications, but through some kind of quantum entanglement. They are sharing thoughts, memories, tactical data in real time. We call it the network. Admiral Yoon explained. Every human who died defending their world became part of it. Every sacrifice, every moment of pain, every act of defiance, all of it preserved, all of it focused on a single purpose. What purpose? Tahoe asked, though he feared the answer. Survival, not just of humanity, but of everything the Void Swarm would destroy. We have become something new, Admiral Kim, something that can stand against the darkness. The human weapons fired again, and this time the Void Swarm formation began to collapse entirely. Enemy ships fled in all directions, their perfect coordination shattered by the human assault, but the humans did not let them escape. Pursuit vessels, sleek and deadly, hunted down every fleeing enemy with relentless efficiency. This is Admiral Suho Lee of the Vengeance Eternal, came another voice. All Council forces prepare for Phase 2 operations. We are taking the fight to their home territory. Home territory? Teho asked. The Void Swarm does not have a home. They are nomadic. They consume everything. They have a source. Admiral Yoon interrupted. Something that created them, something that sent them into our galaxy. We found it. The main tactical display shifted, showing not just the local battle, but a wider view of the galaxy. In the dark regions where the Void Swarm had consumed entire star systems, new lights were beginning to appear. Human lights we have been building, Admiral Yoon explained. Not just ships and weapons, but entire civilizations, mobile worlds that can survive in consumed space. We are not just going to defeat the Void Swarm. We are going to reclaim everything they took from us. Tahoe stared at the display, trying to understand what he was seeing. The humans had not just survived the consumption of their worlds, they had used it as an opportunity to become something unprecedented. In galactic history, the human ships were not just vessels anymore, they were extensions of human will. Each one connected to every other through the network that had grown from the consciousness of the dead. The ships themselves seemed to be alive, their hulls pulsing with organic rhythms, their weapons growing and changing as they learned from each battle. What have you become? Teho whispered. What we had to become. Admiral Yoon replied, what humanity always becomes when faced with extinction. We became something that does not know how to quit. The human fleet began to move again, but this time they were not just fighting. They were building, constructing something in the space around them that defied all understanding. Ships merged and separated, reformed and evolved. The fleet itself was becoming a single, massive organism. We are not the same species that asked to join your council, Admiral Yoon continued. We are something new, something forged in the fires of extinction and tempered by loss. We are what happens when you push humanity too far. The Void Swarm ships that remained were fleeing in panic, but there was nowhere to run. The human pursuit vessels were faster, stronger, and utterly relentless. They hunted their prey across star systems, through asteroid fields, and into the dark spaces between worlds, and everywhere they went, they left behind something new. Human colonies that could survive in the consumed regions, mobile worlds that carried the light of civilization into the darkness. The humans were not just fighting back, they were expanding, they were taking the galaxy back one system at a time. The victory over the Void Swarm at Harmony Edge was just the beginning. Within hours of the last enemy vessel being destroyed or converted, the human fleet began operations that broke everything the Galactic Council understood about military strategy and logistics. Admiral Taeho Kim stood in the conference room aboard Harmony Edge, surrounded by holographic projections of human fleet commanders. Each face told a story of transformation. These were not the polished diplomatic officers he had known from council meetings. These were beings forged in the fires of extinction and emerged as something entirely new. The Void Swarm retreat pattern reveals their primary staging areas. Admiral Jae Sung Yoon explained. His scarred features were lit up. By tactical displays, they are not random consumers. They are organized directed from central command nodes located in the deep void between galaxies. Captain Hanwuli studied the star charts with growing amazement. Those regions are impossible to reach. They are beyond the galactic barrier in spaces where faster-than-light travel is impossible for normal technology, Admiral Yunji-Han corrected. But we have moved beyond normal limitations. Show them the breakthrough. Drive. Holographic display shifted to show the interior of a human vessel, but the technology was unlike anything in Council databases. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with life, and the machinery appeared to be grown rather than built at the center. Of it all was a device that hurt to look at, directly a sphere of absolute darkness, surrounded by rings of light that bent space-time around them. We call it the Void Drive. Admiral Mi Young Kim explained it does not travel through space, it travels through the consumed regions themselves. We use the Void Swarm own consumption trails as highways. Lieutenant Commander Sojin Park looked up from her analysis station. Her face was pale with shock. Sir, the energy requirements for something like that would be astronomical. You would need the power output of an entire star. We have the power output of several stars, Admiral Donghayan Park replied calmly. Every human world that was consumed, we did not just evacuate the people, we evacuated the stars themselves. The implications of that statement hung in the air like a physical weight. Ensign Minho Choi stammered, You moved stars, we moved everything? Admiral Yoon confirmed, every human world, every space station, every asteroid mining facility. When we realized the Void Swarm was unstoppable using normal methods, we did what humans do best. We adapted, we became nomadic. The tactical display expanded to show the current state of the galaxy in the dark regions where the Void Swarm had consumed. Entire star systems' new lights were beginning to appear, but these were not the steady glow of natural stars. They were mobile, moving through the consumed regions with purpose and direction. We have built a civilization that can survive in dead space. Admiral Yunji-Han continued. Our worlds are mobile, our populations are connected through the network, and our technology has evolved beyond anything the Council ever imagined. But the cost. Taeho protested. The resources required the energy expenditure. The cost was everything. Admiral Yoon interrupted. Every human life, every world, every dream we had ever had. But that is what the Void Swarm never understood. Humans do not just fight for what they have. They fight for what they have lost. The conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans had not just survived the Void Swarm assault. They had used it as an opportunity to go beyond their previous limitations. What is your plan? Taeho asked finally. Phase 1 is complete, Admiral Mi Young Kim announced. We have established that the Void Swarm can be defeated using their own technology against them. Phase 2 begins now. We follow them home. The holographic display shifted to show the deployment of the human fleet. But this was not the same fleet that had arrived at Harmony Edge. In the hours since the battle, it had grown exponentially. Ships that had been damaged were not just repaired, but improved. New vessels were being built from the wreckage of destroyed Void Swarm ships. The human fleet was evolving in real time. We are not just going to defeat the Void Swarm, Admiral Yoon declared. We are going to liberate every consumed region. Every dead star system will be brought back to life. Every destroyed world will be rebuilt. We are going to undo everything they have done. That is impossible. Captain Hyun-woo protested. The consumed regions are gone. Matter and energy cannot be recovered from complete entropy. Matter and energy cannot be recovered using Council science, Admiral Yunji-Han corrected, but we have learned things during our exile. We have discovered that consciousness itself can serve as a template for reconstruction. Every being that ever lived in the consumed regions, their patterns still exist in the quantum foam. Sojin looked up from her console. Her eyes were wide with realization. You are talking about resurrection on a galactic scale. We are talking about justice, Admiral Yoon replied. The Void Swarm consumed our galaxy, thinking there would be no consequences. They were wrong. The human fleet began to move, but not in any formation the Council had ever seen. Instead of traveling in groups, each ship seemed to phase in and out of normal space-time, appearing and disappearing as they moved through dimensions that should not exist. Where are they going? Taeho asked. Everywhere, Admiral Donghayan Park answered. Every consumed system, every dead world, every region where the Void Swarm has fed. We are not just pursuing them. We Are reclaiming the galaxy in? What about the Council? Teho asked. What about the surviving worlds and species? Admiral Yoon's scarred face showed something that might have been a smile. You are welcome to join us, Admiral Kim, but understand this is not the same humanity that once asked for membership in your council. We have become something new, something that does not ask permission to exist. The main display showed the human fleet spreading out across the galaxy, each ship carrying technology and weapons that broke normal understanding, but more than that, they carried something else. Hope. The hope that what had been lost could be found again, that what had been destroyed could be rebuilt, that what had been consumed could be restored. The human ships did not just travel through space, they traveled through time itself, moving backwards along the consumption trails to find the moments before the void swarm had fed. They were not just reclaiming territory, they were reclaiming history. This is Admiral Suho Lee of the Vengeance Eternal, came a voice over the comm. All vessels prepare for trans-dimensional jump. We are taking the fight to the source. The human fleet began to disappear, not moving through space, but through the consumed regions themselves. They were traveling through the void, using the swarm-owned consumption trails as highways to reach their source. We have mapped every consumed region, Admiral Yoon explained, every destroyed world, every dead star, every place where the void swarm has fed leaves a scar in space-time. We can follow those scars back to their origin. The implications were staggering. The humans were not just planning to defeat the void swarm, they were planning to undo everything the enemy had ever done, to bring back every consumed world, every destroyed civilization, every lost life. May the ancients protect you, Teho whispered. The ancients are dead, Admiral Yoon replied. But the future is still alive, and we are going to make sure it stays that way. The last human ship disappeared into the void, leaving behind only the promise of return. And somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, an ancient enemy was about to learn what it meant to face a species that had learned how to turn death itself into a weapon. The real war was just beginning. In the space between galaxies where the void swarm had built their primary staging ground, something unprecedented was happening. The massive construct that served as their central command, a structure larger than most solar systems, was under attack. For the first time in its existence, Admiral Jae-sung Yoon stood on the bridge of the humanity, wrath watching as human ships phased in and out of reality around the void swarm ultimate stronghold. The enemy home base was a twisted combination of consumed worlds compressed into a single massive structure that pulsed with dark energy. Sir, we are detecting over 1 million void swarm vessels defending the construct, reported Admiral Yoon Ji-han from the Wrathful Phoenix. They are using defensive patterns we have never seen before because they have never had to defend before, Admiral Yoon replied. They have always been the predators. Today they learn what it feels like to be prey. The human fleet had grown beyond all recognition during their journey through the consumed regions. What had started as 50,000 ships had become over 300,000 vessels, each one using technology salvaged from destroyed void swarm ships and rebuilt worlds. But more than that, they had rescued something the enemy thought was lost forever. Phase 1 is complete, Admiral Mi Young Kim announced from the Retribution. We have successfully extracted the consciousness patterns of every being consumed in the Andromeda sector. The network is integrating them now. The network, what had begun as a method for human consciousness to survive the consumption of their worlds, had evolved into something far greater. Every being that had ever lived in the consumed regions, their memories, their knowledge, their very essence had been preserved in the quantum foam and was now being integrated into the human war machine. Sir, called out Admiral Dong Hyan Park from the Eternal Vengeance. I am reading something massive inside the central construct. It is not a ship, it is alive. The main display shifted to show the interior of the void swarm stronghold, revealed through quantum sensors that could see through the construct defenses. What they saw broke all understanding. A being of pure entropy, larger than gas giants, feeding on the consumed matter of entire civilizations. The prime swarm, Admiral Yoon breathed, the source of all consumption. It is not from our reality. Admiral Yoon Ji-han reported. Her voice was filled with scientific fascination and growing horror. It is from somewhere else, a dimension where entropy is reversed, where destruction creates energy instead of consuming it. The Human fleet began to move into their final formation, but this was not like any military maneuver in recorded history. The ships themselves began to merge, combining into larger and larger vessels until the entire fleet had become a single massive construct. A fusion of human engineering and void swarm technology that broke the laws of physics all consciousness. Patterns prepare for integration, Admiral Yoon commanded. Every being that ever lived in the consumed regions, every species that the swarm destroyed. Today you get your revenge. The network expanded, encompassing not just human consciousness, but the rescued minds of billions of beings from thousands of different species. The Altarians with their crystal thoughts, the Cricks with their hive memories, the ancient keepers with their timeless wisdom, all of them united in a single purpose, the Prime Swarm seemed to sense what was happening. Its massive form writhed within the central construct, and for the first time in eons, it felt something it had not experienced before. Fear. You cannot stop the consumption. It spoke directly into their minds. Its voice was like the death of stars. We are entropy itself. We are the end of all things. You are parasites, Admiral Yoon replied, and his voice carried the weight of every lost world, every destroyed civilization, every life that had been consumed. We are the cure. The human construct began to glow with an inner light that grew brighter and brighter. The consciousness patterns of every consumed being flowed through the network. Their combined will focused on a single goal, not just to defeat the Void Swarm, but to undo everything they had ever done. The Prime Swarm lashed out with weapons that could crack dimensions, but the human construct absorbed every attack. The pain and energy that had once fed the Void Swarm now powered something greater, the will of every being that had ever lived, the determination